I am Travis Bull. I am from Newaygo actually, but the buck over to off my left-hand shoulder was shot in Kent County, and it was off of a family farm that actually I've been hunting on since I was probably 15 years old. So I remember the day. It was November 23rd, and hunting with my father-in-law, and we actually were running a little late, and we were both on a four-wheeler, and we were heading over to my shack. My father-in-law was going to drop me off to my blind, and we were going through the orchard. And what we usually do is he drops me off, and I walk back down to the orchard to see if there's any deer laying in the orchard. And of course, I was running a little behind, so I didn't do it this time, and I was walking out to my shack. My father-in-law dropped me off, and he took off. I heard the four-wheeler take off, and then I heard it stop. I was like, he probably dropped his glove or something off of his four-wheeler. And then I heard it take off like crazy, and I'm like, that doesn't sound normal. I wasn't even to my shack, and I heard a gunshot, and I was like, well, I knew that was him. And so I walked out of the orchard into a bean field, and of course I'm trying to get a hold of him. He didn't answer his phone, and then he calls me, and he said, "It's the big buck, it's the big one." And I said, "How big?" He said, "It's that big 10-point." And I'm like, "You got to be kidding me." I said, "Did you get it?" He said, "No, but I know where it went." So I was thinking about it. He took off, and he said, well, I'm going to set up on the south side. It actually went into a swale, and it was with four does. So the buck was actually laying in the orchard with four does at that time, and we've never seen this buck in daylight. We've had a couple trail cam pics of him, but never saw him in daylight. I've had several buddies, miles away that have told me about this deer. Father-in-law had him on trail camera, like I said several times, but again, no daylight footage of this guy. And it was about 3:30 in the afternoon when we were going out. So again, I knew where my father-in-law was going to be. I started walking across the bean field, and it was about a quarter of a mile walk. And all I could think about is, oh boy, this is going to be tough, because I know that swale, I know it really well. And I knew he said he went in there and he didn't come out, so we found out a pretty good idea where he was at. But the whole time going over there, I was just thinking about, this is not going to be good, because the grass was up to about my shoulders. And I said, this deer's got the huge advantage on us. And I dropped my backpack. I remember hanging it on a tree. I grabbed my gun. First thing I did was dial down my scope. I was hunting with a 300 mag, so it's definitely not a gun that I was anticipating using in the brush. It's usually my gun I use in the stand. And walked over, kind of thought about it. I actually took my gun up, brought it up several different times just in case, just to get the feel for a quick shot in that brush. And again, I got to the north side of the swale. My father was on the south side. I gave him a phone call one last time to figure out where he was at. And I knew right where he was at. He knew exactly where I was at. And I said, okay, we're going in. I said, "You sure about it?" He says, "Oh yeah, we got to go in there." I actually thought I was going to bump this deer out to my father-in-law and he would get a shot at it. Or I thought that deer was going to head probably backwards and head north. But anyway, I started walking in that swale. Like I said, it was up to my shoulders. And I'm 6'4", so it's pretty tall. And I took a couple steps and waited and listened, and nothing happened. And kept pursuing, kept walking south in that swale, and it was probably about 75 yards deep from north to south. And I finally got to a clearing, and I looking around and didn't see anything. I said, man, this would be a good time if that deer would show up, because there's a little bit of a clearing there. And I took one step, and all of a sudden I heard a bunch of crash, and I looked to my right, and he popped up. He was bedded down right where my father-in-law said he was going to be. And he popped up, and I took my gun, swung it around, took a shot, didn't even come close. And then he actually came running right towards me, quartering away, and then he ended up running straight away from me. So picked up the gun, racked another one in there, and shot, and I saw him, he dropped right there. So he's probably 60 yards away, and of course I gave a holler out to my father-in-law, said I got him. And I grabbed my phone, called my wife. I said, I got the big boy, he's down. And then the phone call started, because like I said, I had two other buddies that were hunting the same deer miles away. And I actually had a buddy, Brian, that was, he called me the night before and said, "Travis, I got the big 10. He's over on my property." I said, "Dang it." And He said, I'm gonna go, I know where he's bedding at. He's in his bed, I'm gonna go get him tomorrow, and this guy's a really good hunter. And I told my wife, I said, yeah, Brian's gonna get that buck tomorrow, I know he is. And my wife says, well, how do you know? I said, well, that deer's with some does. He's not gonna move with those does. She says, well, how do you know he's not gonna show up on our farm? I said, he's just not gonna do that, right? So I called Brian on, it would have been on a Saturday morning. I called him, he said, no, I didn't see him. I'm like, oh, that's too bad for you, buddy. And then, so I went out, my wife says, you gotta go out there and go hunting. I called my father, I said, let's go out. And couldn't believe it that this big buck was laying in the orchard, daylight hours with 4 does. But it was just awesome. I couldn't believe when I got up to him. Perfect buck. I just couldn't believe it. So it was by far the biggest buck I ever shot. We've had a couple of dandies on that farm, but it just never was my time, and this time it was. So I remember running out to the bean field, seeing my father-in-law. He was on his four-wheeler, and he said, where's he at? And I said, we got him. And I gave him a high five, and I gave him a hug, and we went over and saw him. And then we started wondering what we were going to do with him. And you know, we tagged him, and then I started calling those buddies that were hunting this deer, and they all said, don't do anything, we're coming over, we got to see him. And they both came over, that Brian, and I had a buddy named Gabe, another farmer in the area that's hunting this deer during bow season. They just wanted to put their hands on him. So it was a awesome day, and I know my wife's getting sick of me talking about it, but it's all good, man. But awesome deer, we had a great time, and it was awesome to have that with my father-in-law, actually. It was really cool. That's it. 163 and 5/8 gross, 157 and 2/8 net. So in Kent County, I was told it should be top 10 of all time. So that's my story.